The auditorium went silent before the applause. That strange kind of silence that happens right before someone important walks on stage. You could almost hear people inhale together. And then, clap, clap, clap. It started. But I knew immediately. They weren't clapping for me. They were clapping for her. For Marlis. For the woman who hadn't spoken my name in 4 years, not even once. Not in emails, not in court, not even to our son. I became the other parent, the absentee, the ghost. But now here she was, walking in late to our son's graduation in red heels and a confidence I once mistook for grace. Her new husband trailed behind her like a bodyguard. He had that tech bro who does yoga look. Glossy teeth. Forearms bigger than his IQ. You know the type. She didn't see me at first. Because no one does when you're sitting behind the lighting rig. Second to last row, left corner. That's where I sat. That's where they let me sit. After I begged the admin over email to please just let me attend, I'll keep my distance. For years. That's how long it had been since I heard her voice. Since the night she left and said, let's not make this harder than it has to be. She made it impossible. I lost custody. I lost the house. I lost Cashion, our son, without even getting to say goodbye properly. I used to sit outside his school and just watch. Like some desperate creep with a faded baseball cap and unpaid therapy bills. But today was supposed to be different. Today, I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to cause a scene. I wasn't going to remember the night she served me divorce papers in a restaurant between the appetizers and the entrees. No, today was for Cashion. So I sat there, quiet, invisible, watching the stage. And then he walked out, taller than I remembered, shoulders wider, tie crooked in a way that made my chest tighten. His walk was nervous, but proud. And I knew he'd practiced it in the mirror, maybe even used YouTube tutorials. He was always like that, quiet prep, loud heart. When they called his name, the whole auditorium erupted. He smiled, looked out into the crowd, scanned the seats, and his eyes landed on her. Not me, her. And that should have been the worst part. But it wasn't, because 3 seconds later, his eyes kept moving, until they found me. And when she saw that, when Marlis noticed who he was looking at, when her polished head turned slowly and spotted me, standing up quietly with my trembling hands clapping too, her face, changed. And she knew everything she had buried was about to surface. Because I hadn't come alone, because I hadn't come quietly, and because Cashion didn't just look at me. He smiled. Cashion's smile didn't last more than 2 seconds, but that was all it took. 2 seconds, and everything she tried to rewrite about me cracked like a windshield hit by a single stone. I saw it. The twitch in her jaw. The way her hand clenched around her stupid little clutch bag like it held a detonator. That wasn't just surprise, it was fear. She hadn't expected him to recognize me. She hadn't expected him to look for me. Because in her mind, I was the man who vanished into a dusty one-bedroom, who stopped sending birthday gifts, who gave up. She told everyone I did. That was her version of the story. The version that won her sympathy, custody, and a new last name by the end of that same year. But her face, when she saw him smile like that, it was like watching someone realize they left the stove on, in a house they already sold. Panic, guilt, but worse than that, exposure. She wasn't the lead character in this moment anymore. She was cornered by something she couldn't control, genuine connection. Cashion didn't wave. He just held my eyes for a breath longer than necessary. That's how I knew it wasn't a mistake. That smile wasn't polite. It wasn't confused. It was real. The kind of smile you give someone who still matters, even after years of being told they don't. And then he looked away. I stayed standing, clapping, trying not to shake. My hands were clammy, and for some reason, my knees felt numb. I'd rehearsed this moment 100 times. I imagined she'd ignore me. That he would too. That I'd cry in the car and drive home to warm beer and a voicemail box filled with junk offers from internet providers. But this wasn't what I'd prepared for. The ceremony went on. Names, applause, pomp and circumstance. I barely heard any of it. I just kept my eyes forward, afraid that if I blinked, the whole moment would disappear like a hallucination. Then, the final applause hit. Tassels turned. And just like that, they were graduates. I waited. I stayed in my seat as families began to move toward the exit, hugging their kids, snapping blurry photos, crying happy tears into floral-printed tissues. I waited until the row in front of me cleared. then the row behind, until it felt safe enough to breathe. And then I saw them, her and her husband, cutting through the crowd like royalty, acting like nothing was wrong, like I hadn't just broken through 4 years of silence in a single glance. But she looked back, just once, like she couldn't help it. And in that one look, I saw something I hadn't seen on her face in years: uncertainty. She was nervous, because she didn't know how much Cashion remembered. She didn't know what he would say next. And she didn't know that I had been talking to someone this entire time. Because no, I hadn't come alone. While she was busy erasing me, I was quietly working behind the curtain, collecting threads, names, files, timelines. And the person who had helped me the most? He was walking toward me now. His name is Wes. You wouldn't notice him in a crowd. That's his gift. He wears dull colors, has a slouch in his walk, and never makes eye contact for more than a second. But Wes remembers everything. He's the type of guy who can tell you what shirt you were wearing 3 Tuesdays ago and which direction the wind was blowing when you said something you shouldn't have. He was Cashion's best friend since 7th grade. At first, I didn't even know the kid existed. I found his name by accident while scrolling through a parent email chain I wasn't supposed to still have access to. One name kept coming up next to my son's in every group activity. Wes Fletcher. That name stuck. So I dug. Quietly. I reached out to him through a burner email address. I told him who I was. I expected silence, maybe even hostility. Instead, I got a reply within 15 minutes. I've been waiting for you to message me. That line chilled me. It wasn't what I expected from a 17-year-old. We started talking. First emails, then encrypted messages. I kept everything off-grid. Wes never asked for money. Never asked for attention. All he wanted was to show me the truth. What truth? The truth about what she'd been doing to Cashion. Wes told me things I wasn't prepared to hear. Like how she'd force Cashion to rehearse appropriate things to say about Dad before school events in case any teachers asked. How she'd confiscate his phone if he searched for my name. How she'd rewrite stories, things I actually did, and assign them to her new husband so it would sound better. The kid had recordings. Not because I asked, but because he said it felt wrong not to. Secret phone clips. Audio files. One of them shook me to my core. It was my son, in his bedroom, whispering to Wes over FaceTime. I don't even know if he's alive anymore. But I still think about him. I still remember his voice. I must have replayed that clip 50 times. And I cried every time. Quietly, in my dark apartment, staring at the ceiling like it owed me something. That one recording brought me back to life. Made me feel real again. But that wasn't all Wes had. He also had something far more damning. An audio file recorded accidentally by Marlis herself, on a day she thought no one was listening. Wes had been over at their house, helping Cashion with a history project. He'd left his phone on the kitchen counter recording TikToks earlier and forgot to turn it off. What it caught was monstrous. She was drunk, or at least buzzing. You could hear it in her slurring. I don't even care if Cashion hates me when he's older, she said. By then, I'll have spent all the child support and moved on. Darvin was a loser. That kid needs to forget he ever came from him. Wes never sent that file to anyone but me. And now, standing in the graduation auditorium, among balloons and applause and streaming tears, he was walking straight toward me with the same deadpan expression he always had. He stopped a few feet away, pulled something from his coat pocket, and handed it to me. A flash drive. Unlabeled. Cold. Heavy. She doesn't know I made backups, he said flatly. But your son needs to hear what you heard. I looked at Wes, really looked at him for the first time. This wasn't just some loyal friend. This was the kid who'd done what no adult in my life dared to do, believe me. As I took the flash drive, something inside me shifted. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I wasn't a deleted file or an erased father. I was a fuse. And graduation day wasn't the end of the story. It was the spark. I held the flash drive in my hand for a long time. It was warm now. Or maybe my hand was just sweating. I didn't know what to do with it at first. I had imagined this moment hundreds of times, some version of it, at least. But now that it was real, I felt unworthy. Like I was standing in front of something powerful, and all I had was shaky breath and a history of cowardice. Wes just stood there. No drama, no pressure. Just handed it over like it was a stapler or a pack of gum. Then he nodded, barely, and said, I've got to find my mom before she freaks out. But he'll want to talk to you. Just wait. He didn't say who he was. He didn't have to. Cashion. I sat back down in the same chair, second to last row, the one with the scratch and the armrest shaped like a lightning bolt. I hadn't noticed it earlier. Funny what you see when adrenaline slows down. I tucked the flash drive deep into my coat pocket and tried to calm myself. Around me, the auditorium buzzed with movement. Families grouped up for photos. Kids threw their caps again for the second or third time, and parents cried like they were sending their kids off to war instead of state college. Marlis wasn't in sight anymore. She had disappeared, probably off to some planned celebration with balloons and a custom cake, and some new lie about how she raised him all on her own. That had always been her favorite line. I used to see it in her social media captions, the ones I wasn't supposed to check, the ones she probably thought I'd blocked myself from seeing. She had rewritten me as a ghost, as an obstacle she had overcome. But now, I had something she didn't. I had proof. Proof of manipulation, of emotional abuse, of calculated lies. And more than that, I had a tiny thread of connection to my son again. That was everything. I felt the chair beside me creak. I didn't look at first, didn't dare. But the voice that came next didn't belong to Wes, or Marlis, or anyone else. It was Cashion. Hey, Darvin. My throat locked. He called me by my first name. Not Dad. Not even Father. But that was okay. It wasn't said with venom. It was cautious. Careful. Like someone speaking to a memory that might shatter if touched too hard. I turned and looked at him. He looked older. Not just physically. Though yeah, the last time I saw him, he still had braces and a baby face. But now his expression had angles, his jaw had definition, and his eyes looked like they'd seen things they couldn't unsee. But he was nervous too. He kept fiddling with the string on his graduation gown, tugging it in and out like it was a puzzle. I saw you during the ceremony, he said, his voice soft. I wasn't sure it was you at first. I nodded. I wasn't sure I should come. Cashion didn't respond right away. He just kept tugging at the string. Then finally, he asked, "Did you get my message?" I blinked. Message? He nodded. About 6 months ago, I made a fake Instagram account. Messaged you from it. I didn't know if it was still your number or email or whatever, but I said I hoped you were okay. I deleted it after, just in case she found it. My heart fell into my stomach. I had never seen it. Maybe it went as spam. Maybe I missed it. Maybe the universe just didn't want me to have that tiny piece of hope at the time. I didn't get it, I said honestly, but I'm glad you sent it. We sat in silence for a few more seconds. Then he added, Wes told me what you've been doing. About everything. About how she lied. About the stuff you found. I froze. Did you believe him? Cashion looked down at his hands, then up at the ceiling. I didn't want to, but some of it started lining up. Things that never made sense started making sense. Why she wouldn't let me keep anything that reminded me of you. Why she changed the subject every time I asked where you were, or why you stopped calling. Why she never cried about the divorce, just bragged about surviving it. He paused. I didn't stop thinking about you, he said, so quietly I almost missed it. Not even once. I swallowed hard. Every instinct in me wanted to hug him, to cry, to fall apart right there in that ugly auditorium chair. But I stayed still. This wasn't the moment for grand gestures. This wasn't a movie. Instead, I pulled the flash drive from my pocket and held it out to him. You don't have to listen to it now, I said. Or ever. But if you want to know the truth, really know it, it's on here. Cashion took it slowly. He turned it over in his hand like it was made of glass. He didn't say anything, just nodded. Then, out of nowhere, a loud voice echoed from the auditorium entrance. It was Marlis. Cashion, come on, sweetheart. Everyone's waiting. Her tone was fake sweet, that saccharine voice she always used around other people. I saw him flinch. Just barely. A twitch of his shoulder. He stood up. So did I. Are you going to be okay? He asked, stuffing the flash drive into his pocket. I've been worse, I said with a tired laugh. Much worse. He nodded again. Then, without looking back, he walked away. But I knew something had changed. I could feel it in the air. Like the storm was already rolling in behind the mountains, still quiet, but undeniable. And for the first time in 4 years, I felt like someone who mattered again. I didn't go home right away. After Cashion left, I walked out of the auditorium and sat in the parking lot in my car, engine off, keys in my hand, just staring out through the windshield at nothing. The sun had dipped low behind the buildings, casting long shadows that turned the row of cars into silhouettes. A few people passed by, laughing, hugging, taking selfies with their kids, and none of them looked at me. I was invisible again. But this time, it didn't feel like punishment. It felt like camouflage, like I was watching something from the outside that was already starting to crack. Somewhere in that building, Marlis was probably taking photos with her curated version of our son, laughing too loud, repeating the same story about how hard she worked as a single mother, how she didn't let divorce define her, and how some people just aren't meant to be parents. I could imagine her voice, the fake poise, that smug confidence of someone who thinks they've already won. But this wasn't over. I drove around town for hours, just circling, not thinking, not planning, just absorbing. The city looked different than I remembered. Or maybe it was me who'd changed. Same gas stations, same fast food chains, same broken sidewalks. But it all felt like a life I had watched from underwater. Muffled, distorted. And now, I had finally surfaced. When I got home that night, to my small, quiet apartment that still had a folding chair instead of a real couch, I opened my laptop. Not to post, not to rant, but to prepare. I didn't want revenge. I wanted truth. I wanted Cashion to know the entire picture, not just bits and pieces passed along by his friend or whispered in parking lots. I wanted him to know who I really was, who I had been, and who I had become after the silence. I wrote him a letter, a long one, not to explain everything. There's no way to fit 4 years of grief, erasure, and therapy receipts into one document, but to open the door. I didn't beg him to love me. I didn't defend myself. I just gave him the honest, ugly version of what had happened after I disappeared from his life. Then I sent it to the same burner account Wes had used to reach me, the one Cashion had accessed once before. No subject line, no name, just the file. And I waited. 3 days passed. Nothing. Then, on the 4th morning, I got a single-line reply from a new email address I didn't recognize. I listened to it. That's all it said. No greeting. No emotion. Just confirmation. I stared at that message for almost an hour, not sure what to do with it. But I didn't need more than that. If he had listened, then everything had changed. If he heard his mother's voice, her words, her cold disinterest in whether he loved her or not, then the version of the story she sold him for years had just started to rot from the inside. The next message came 6 hours later. From the same account. Can I see you again? Not for long. Just to talk. I don't want her to know. I responded instantly. We agreed on a public place. Neutral. A small park on the east side. The one with the broken water fountain and the faded dinosaur statue that used to terrify him as a kid. He was already there when I arrived. Hoodie up. Head down. Sitting on a bench by the sandbox, where no one else was around. I approached slowly. No sudden movements. Like I was walking toward a deer that could bolt at any moment. He didn't look at me right away. I thought you were the bad guy, he said after a long silence. I know. I believed her, he added. I really believed she was doing the right thing. That you had given up. That you left because you didn't care. I didn't even question it. You weren't supposed to, I said gently. She made sure of that. He looked at me now. His eyes were red, not from crying. Not recently, anyway, but from exhaustion. The kind that sits deep in your chest. That weight that doesn't go away even after sleep. You could have fought harder, he said suddenly. You could have come to my school. Demanded to see me. Called more. I kept waiting for you to show up like in movies. You never did. He was right. And I told him that. I failed 100 different ways, I said. But I didn't stop caring. Ever. Cashion reached into his backpack and pulled something out. A small flash drive, different from the one Wes gave him. This one had a label on it, written in pen, before she left. I found this in one of her old laptops. It was in the trash folder, he said. It's video. I think it was recorded by accident. She didn't know it was there. I didn't ask him what was on it. I just took it carefully, like it might break. She's already starting to feel me pull away, he said quietly. She knows something's changed. She's been asking weird questions. I've been lying to her. You don't have to do this alone, I told him. Cashion looked up, and then he said something that shook me harder than any lie she ever told. I think she lied about other things too. Things before the divorce. Things about me. That was the first moment I realized this story wasn't just about me being erased. It was about him being rewritten too. And neither of us had seen the full picture yet. I didn't open the flash drive that night. I couldn't. Not because I wasn't curious, but because I already knew, deep down, that whatever was on that drive would change something fundamental. Maybe about her. Maybe about Cashion. Maybe about me. And for once, I wanted to pause before diving into a new fracture. For the first time in years, I had spoken to my son without crying or collapsing. I wanted to keep that moment untouched, just for one night. But the next morning, as the gray light filtered in through the blinds, cutting my apartment into stripes, I plugged it in. There were 5 files. No names, just numbers. I opened the first one. It was grainy, time-stamped about 6 months before the divorce. I recognized the kitchen. Our kitchen. The pale yellow wallpaper I hated but never got around to replacing. Marlis was in frame, talking on speakerphone while prepping something in a mixing bowl. Her hair was up, and she was wearing a shirt I remembered buying her for her birthday. The one that said, "Don't speak until coffee." Funny how you notice those details when your stomach's already bracing for impact. I didn't recognize the voice on the other end of the call, but I knew the tone. It was the tone of someone who believed they were whispering behind your back, unaware the wall had ears. "He still thinks the kid is his," Marlis was saying, her laugh tight and cruel. "I mean, it's not like I'm going to tell him now. What would be the point? He wouldn't leave anyway. He's too emotionally neutered to walk out, and he wouldn't survive a scandal." I froze. The video kept playing, but my body didn't move. Not a twitch. My eyes were locked on her lips, as if they'd become detached from the woman I once kissed in grocery store aisles. My ears burned. Another voice on the call laughed. Female. Familiar. I couldn't place it yet. Marlis continued, still stirring the bowl. "I used to think I'd tell him when Cashion turned 18. Just drop it like a little truth bomb. But now? It's too late. We've already built the brand. Divorced mom. Raised a man on my own. Clean image. Besides, Darvin doesn't need more reasons to spiral. He already looks like a raccoon in a dad costume." I felt like vomiting. My hands shook so badly, I paused the video to keep from clicking the wrong file. I sat there, breathing hard, trying to decide whether what I heard meant what I thought it meant, or if it could be twisted into something else. Some metaphor, some sarcasm, some cruel joke. But the tone, it wasn't a joke. I played the next file. This time, the camera was shaky, as if it had been set down on a surface and bumped. You could only see part of the living room. Marlis and Cashion were mid-conversation, though she didn't know she was being recorded. She was annoyed, raising her voice, and Cashion, 14, maybe 15 at the time, was standing near the window. He was asking her questions. About me. "Why can't I go to Dad's this weekend?" "Because he's unstable," she snapped. "Do you want to end up with a broken mind like his? You need to focus on school, not his sob stories." "You said I was going next week." "Well, plans change. Get used to it. That's life." "You said he was my dad." "He's functionally your dad," she hissed. "There's more to being a father than biology, and he doesn't even pass that test." Cashion stood there, his jaw clenched, his fists balled at his sides. His voice cracked a little when he said, "That's not what you used to say." And then, the part that broke me. "Stop acting like he's some kind of hero," she barked. "He was a mistake. One I've been cleaning up for years." I slammed the laptop shut. Hard. The sound echoed in my empty apartment like a gunshot. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. My hands were sweaty, cold, shaking. My vision blurred around the edges. If what she was implying was true, if she'd known all these years that I wasn't Cashion's biological father, then everything she did wasn't just about erasing me from her life. She had spent years convincing our son that I didn't matter, that I was disposable, unnecessary, a prop in a story she wanted to edit into something more flattering. But she never once questioned the fathering, never challenged the way I read him stories when he was sick, or built his science projects from scratch, or stayed up late helping him practice lines for a school play. She let me give and give and give, knowing the whole time that somewhere in her pocket, she was carrying a truth she had no right to keep. I needed answers. Real ones. Not audio. Not video. Not memory. Proof. And there was only one way to get it. I made an appointment that afternoon. Quietly. A DNA lab on the outskirts of town. Cashion had left a water bottle behind after our last meeting. It still had a little saliva on the mouthpiece. I felt guilty. Sick, even. Like I was violating something sacred. But I had to know. Because if Marlis had stolen my place in Cashion's life based on a lie that went even deeper than betrayal, then this wasn't just a broken family anymore. It was a constructed illusion. And I had been its foundation. The results came in 5 days later. I hadn't slept more than a few hours a night since I dropped off the test. I told myself it didn't matter. That I'd raised Cashion. that I loved him, even if someone else's blood had done the work under his skin. But that was a lie. Of course it mattered. Of course I cared. I was still a human being, still stitched together with soft things like pride and pain and identity. And Marlis had taken a scalpel to all of it. The email arrived at 6:47 a.m. I saw the notification on my phone while I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of instant coffee I hadn't touched. It was just there, steaming quietly, while I stared at my phone like it was ticking. The subject line read, "Your confidential DNA test results are ready." I clicked it. The message was brief, sterile, emotionless, like all medical things. Probability of paternity, 0%. Not low, not uncertain, just 0. Like I had never been there. Like I had never mattered. Like I was some stranger she let raise another man's son because it was easier than telling the truth. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even move for a long time. I sat there, staring at that number, trying to remember all the times Cashion had hugged me as a kid and whispered, "I love you, Dad." Trying to reconcile the sound of that voice, real, soft, warm, with a genetic truth that now said I was never part of him at all. But the thing is, I still remembered those moments. And no spreadsheet could erase them. Still, I needed to know more. Not just that he wasn't mine, but whose he was. And the pieces were already there, just scattered, waiting for someone to stop being afraid and put them together. I started with what I knew. Around the time Cashion would have been conceived, Marlis had reconnected with an old friend from high school. His name was Declan Holtz. He'd reached out just to catch up, and they met for lunch a few times. I remembered feeling uneasy about it, but I never said anything. I didn't want to be the jealous husband. I didn't want to seem insecure. God, what a fool I was. I checked his profile again. I hadn't looked at it in years. Declan Holtz, now a VP at some marketing firm 2 states over. Married. 2 daughters. And wouldn't you know it, one of them looked exactly like Cashion did at 11. Same jawline. Same dimples. Same freaking eyebrows. I knew it wasn't definitive. But I also knew what my gut was telling me. This wasn't just some long-ago mistake. This was a calculated silence, maintained over years. Declan was someone she could count on to stay away. Married. Corporate. Probably didn't even know. So I emailed him. It took me an hour to write 3 sentences. "Hi Declan. I know this is unexpected. I believe you may be Cashion's biological father. Please contact me privately before I involve anyone else. You need to know the truth." He didn't respond. Not that day. Not the next. But I saw the read receipt light up within 5 minutes. So I waited. Meanwhile, I called Cashion and asked if he'd meet me again. I didn't mention the DNA test. Not yet. I needed to think, to breathe, to process. Because here was the thing. Cashion didn't ask to be lied to. He didn't choose this. And if I told him everything now, the identity, the number, the betrayal, I might destroy whatever fragile trust we'd just rebuilt. But what I could do was tell him the part that mattered most. That I had proof now. That she knew all along. That the lie wasn't just about me. It was about his right to know himself. We met at the same park bench. He wore the same hoodie. He looked more tired this time. Like he hadn't slept either. "Is it bad?" he asked before I even sat down. "It's complicated," I said. "But yeah, it's bad." I told him the truth, carefully, gently. I said that I had found out something Marlis had been hiding for years. That there was a strong chance I wasn't his biological father. That it didn't change how I saw him. That love, real love, doesn't need DNA to validate it. Cashion didn't cry, but he did look away for a long time. "She always said I was lucky," he muttered. "That she protected me. That she kept things from me to spare me pain. But now it just feels like I'm the only one who didn't get a say." "You deserve a say," I told him. "You always did." He nodded. Slowly. "So what do we do now?" That was the question. I didn't have an answer yet. But I knew this. Marlis had built her world out of stories. Beautiful, curated, public-facing stories. She painted herself as a survivor, a solo warrior, a perfect mother in a broken world. But truth doesn't stay buried forever. And something was already starting to stir. Because 2 days later, Declan Holtz replied. His message was only 1 line long. "Meet me. No lawyers. No noise. Just the truth." We met at a coffee shop outside city limits, neutral ground. No one there knew our names, and that's exactly what we both wanted. Declan walked in 10 minutes late, looking like someone who hadn't slept in a week. His shirt was wrinkled. "Ty ask you," hands shaking when he reached for the coffee cup the barista handed him. I stood up. He didn't hug me, didn't offer a handshake. He just said, "Is it true?" I nodded. Slowly, quietly. "I have the test. You can see it." He didn't ask for it. He just sat down, looked out the window, and whispered. I had no idea. And in that moment, as much as I hated everything that had brought us there, I believed him. We talked for 45 minutes. No raised voices. No drama. He said the affair was brief, stupid, years ago. He didn't even know Marlis had gotten pregnant that year. She told him she was reconnecting with her husband, that it was too messy, that it was nothing. And like a coward, his words, not mine, he walked away from something he didn't know he'd created. I'm not asking for anything, I told him. Not money, not interference. I'm not trying to start a fight. I just think Cashion deserves the truth. On his terms. Declan nodded. I won't stand in his way. I'll talk to him, only if he wants it. That was all I needed to hear. I left that coffee shop without shaking his hand. Not out of hate, but because I had to protect the boundary between what used to be and what still mattered, and Cashion still mattered. More than biology. More than old wounds. I told Cashion everything the next day. We walked along the river trail near his new campus. The breeze was cold, and geese were arguing over territory on the water. He listened, silent for the entire story. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I told him who Declan was. What he said. What he didn't know. When I finished, Cashion sat down on a bench and stared out across the river. You're not mad? I asked after a few minutes. Oh, I'm mad, he said. But not at you. I waited. He turned toward me, eyes calm, voice steady. I still remember you teaching me how to tie a tie in the mirror. You let me practice on your neck till you had a headache. I smiled a little. That was one ugly tie. He chuckled. You burned breakfast every Saturday. But we still ate it. And you took me to that dumb dinosaur museum every year, even though I was scared of the animatronics. I hated that museum, I admitted. Cashion's eyes softened. You were never fake. You never gave up. Even when she made it look like you did. You were there. Even when you weren't allowed to be. We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he said, if you're still okay with it, I want to keep calling you Dad. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I'd like that. More than anything. He never met Declan. At least not right away. Maybe one day. On his terms. But that wasn't the priority anymore. The priority was rebuilding what we lost. Slowly, honestly, together. As for Marlis, word got around. Wes uploaded the recordings to a private link. He never made them public, never blasted her name. But the right people saw. A few teachers. Some relatives. One of her co-workers. She started showing up less on social media. Less confident. A little quieter. We never confronted her. We didn't need to. The truth was doing the work for us. Quietly, thoroughly, like water eroding stone. 3 months later, Cashion moved into his dorm. I helped him carry boxes. He hugged me before I left. A full hug. No hesitation. No half-pats on the back. I'm gonna text you dumb memes like every day, he said. Good. Make them obscure and borderline unfunny. Obviously, as I drove away, I didn't feel like I'd won. But I didn't feel like I'd lost either. I had my son back. I had peace. And I had the quiet, unshakable truth. Sometimes, love doesn't come from where you expect it. And sometimes, even after you've been erased, you get to rewrite the ending.